Hare Krishna devotees, please accept my humble obeisances. All goes Sri Prabhupada and Good Maharaj. Let's see if my microphone is properly. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Cheva Nartamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayet Nashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Sloke Bhaktir Bhavati Nastiki Namo Vishwapadaye Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namini Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashyata Destarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. Okay, thank you so much for joining. So we'll start discussion. Let me share my screen. Yeah. So it's a philosophical session, but still very interesting. I wanted to give the context of this chapter by giving some overview of the Uddhav Gita section that started from chapter 7, which will go on until chapter 29, almost towards the end of the 11th canto. So this is a quick overview, so we can get the context. So Uddhav Gita started when Uddhava approached Lord Krishna, saying that I understood you are going to leave. Please take me, like that. And Krishna responded by saying that yes, I'm planning to leave, and you should also take sannyasa and plan your departure also from this world, because Kali Yuga will come soon, like that. Then Uddhava was feeling himself lowly and unqualified, and he requested Krishna to give him transcendental knowledge to awaken his natural detachment. So then Krishna started to describe Uddhava Gita. Then Krishna started to explain with the example of with the past history of Avaduta Brahmana, who shared with Maharaj Yadu how he attained an enlightened state by observing 24 gurus in the world. Basically, by using an intelligent person can observe the world and get lessons to elevate their consciousness. To explain that, he explained how he got elevated to that state by describing the 24 gurus. Following that, Krishna describes how all forms of material enjoyment, even heavenly pleasures, are very limited, temporary, and full of duality. So he says one degrades himself more and more in the futile pursuance of such experiences, material experiences. And then he says such an entangled soul who is entangled in material enjoyment begins his journey back to purity by receiving transcendental knowledge from Guru, spiritual master. And by cultivating mood and quality of a true disciple, and by following transcendental instructions from Guru, and engaging one's proposed series in Varnashma system, one gains release from material entanglement, it describes. Then he says, when a soul is awakened to this real transcendental knowledge, he becomes liberated. Even though his body is completely detached from enjoying spirit, and because he never considers himself as a doer. And then he says the ultimate purpose of material detachment and even Vedic study is to enable one to achieve the loving relationship with Krishna. Such connection with Lord and practice of bhakti causes numerous saintly qualities to come in the body of a devotee, and they will become a nice character for a devotee. And most essential quality among all the qualities in a devotee are surrendering to Krishna, because that surrender triggers all subsequent qualities, because devotee does everything else to please Krishna only. And then Krishna glorifies Vrindavan gopis, their highest standard of love, like that, because they are very conscious of Krishna every moment with deep attachment. And more important than gaining knowledge is to follow in their footsteps and develop a similar intensity of surrender and devotion, he describes. So, and then in the 13 to 16 chapters, Krishna describes how Bhakti Yoga is the topmost yoga system. Krishna stresses initially on the importance of developing mode of goodness in one's mindset, lifestyle, and habits, and then eventually transcend from mode of goodness to transcendence like that. And then he explains the example of Hamsavatara, basically not example, previous history, where he himself as a Hamsavatara came to teach sons of Lord Brahma when they asked the question, how do we overcome uh, the mind's attachment to sense objects? Sense objects also enter the mind. Then he explains he explains the nature of the mind, and he says only by fixing the mind on Supreme Lord can one escape the influence of the mind like that. So when we see material energies, material objects independent of Krishna, it's like a dream state because we're not able to see reality in connection with Krishna. For such persons who are not able to see connection to Krishna, they are their reality, their understanding of reality is fundamentally flawed, like that Krishna explains. And then Krishna reassures that even if one is not able to give up sense gratification, but is practicing bhakti, then by the power of bhakti, he will eventually elevate themselves to perfectional stage. But as practice devotees, we should be vigilant and we should guard against any temptations of sense gratification and learn to practice with the heart. Then, when Uddhava wanted some more clarification, then Krishna describes the mystic perfections, the yogic perfections, Ashtanga yoga perfections, or mystic yoga perfections, Ashtasiddhis. And then he describes the Ashtanga yoga process itself, which is used for uh, attaining the Ashtasiddhis. And then finally, Krishna emphasized that Bhakti Yoga gives all the fruits of other yoga systems also. But more importantly, Bhakti Yoga is the one that gives us connection to the Supreme Person in a very intimate way. In such an intimate way that even Krishna becomes conquered and Krishna becomes controlled by the pure devotion of such a devotee like that. So that's what we heard in the 13, 14, 15, 16 chapters. And then Krishna describes, like how in Bhagavata 10th chapter, Krishna describes his opulences to Arjuna. Similarly, in the 16th chapter, we heard Krishna describes here in the 11th canto his opulences. And then he describes how he is the essence of everything in this world like that. I'm still just giving a context, a recap in a different way from yesterday so that we can capture the essences so far what we heard from Krishna. Then there are other two chapters we heard yesterday in the 17th and 18th. Krishna described Varnashrama system elaborately. First, he describes the history of Varnashrama system, where he tells about Satya Yoga. There is only one class called Hamsa, where all the individuals were spotless. They were always in unalloyed devotional service. They were naturally inclined to unalloyed devotional service like that. And then he describes how the next yuga came, Treta Yuga. That is the time Varnashrama system was introduced, where the occupational duties or Varnas are established and orders of life or ashramas are established. So that way, people had their unique role and responsibility in the society. And Krishna concluded that section with these essential duties. I listed them again here because they are very important. Even if you don't understand all the details of Varna and ashramas, these essential duties are important for us. So he says sannyasa, the essence is equanimity and non-violence. For vanaprasthas, austerity and discriminative knowledge of soul and body is important. And then for grihasthas, giving shelter to other living entities and also performing sacrifices. And then from brahmachari, serving the guru is the essential duty, like that he describes. And then Krishna, at the end of the 18th chapter, he described how beyond all these divisions, there are somebody called Paramahamsa Bhakt devotees who have pure heart and they're intimately connected with Supreme Lord like that. So they don't need to follow all these rules and regulations like that he described. And then in the 19th and 20th chapters yesterday we discussed, Krishna describes how bhakti is superior to everything that he described so far. He says, when somebody has transcendental knowledge, that should lead to pure bhakti towards Krishna. All regulations, duties, and recommendations of Shastra are meant to obtain that spontaneous devotion only. In fact, we are practicing devotees doing Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. We are also doing that sadhana, practices of devotional service, devotional service processes only to achieve bhava. That's how Rupa Goswami describes in Bhakti-rasam Sindhu, which is translated to us as nectar of devotion by our Srila Prabhupada. So we are also doing Vaidhi Bhakti to attain bhava and then prema like that. And then Uddhava asked several questions. And among them, while answering those questions, Krishna describes the characteristics of a self-realized soul and the deeper meaning of the different terms we discussed yesterday: tolerance, charity, austerity, heroism, truthfulness, like that. Through that, he explained the real substance of happiness in life, which is actually not to be controlled by sense gratification, but engage in devotion service of Krishna. And he explained himself as a genuine friend, like Suhrudam Sarvabhutanam. He is the best friend of everybody, like that. And then he started to describe in the 20th chapter, how come if unalloyed bhakti is the best, why do scriptures promote different practices like jnana, yoga, and karma? Why are the scriptures describing? Because they are meant to gradually elevate a soul to higher levels of purity. Now we are getting into today's section in 21st chapter here. I'll give brief context and we'll go into details. Krishna describes how, actually this is described in 20th chapter also. Human birth, human life is very, very rare and very, very valuable. That too on earthly planet is even more gift, because we get the best opportunity to practice spiritual life here. And we can escape material entanglement because of that. So, by good fortune, if one practices bhakti and attains that platform of pure devotion, and then all the good and bad that Krishna described, impurity, purity, no longer will affect them. We'll deep dive into this topic today when we are discussing 21st chapter. Basically, to transcend good and bad karma, we need to engage in devotion service. That is the point. So, overall point is when you do bhakti, you'll get everything needed. So, that's how from the 7th chapter, we discussed all the things so far until now in the Uddhav Gita. Now, we'll go to the next phase of Uddhav Gita, next 4 chapters of Uddhav Gita now today. This is also a nice section. These are the overview of the section. Essentially, Lord Krishna explains the different explanations in the Vedic paths, talking about Karma Kanda, portions of the Vedas also, and how to understand Vedic knowledge properly like that. Going to the first section, where Krishna is explaining good and evil, pious and impious, pure and impure things, but he concludes with the purpose of entire Vedic path, which is to know him. We know from Bhagavad Gita, Vedescha Charver Ahameva Vedya. That means purpose of Vedas is to know me, like that Krishna says. So in this section also, Krishna describes the fate of people. He says there are only 3 paths primarily in Vedic literature: Bhakti path, Jnana path, Karma path, like that he says. He doesn't even talk about yoga. He says these are 3 main paths. If somebody ignores all these parts, that means he neglects spiritual elevation completely, and then is only going after sense gratification only, then he will continuously take births and die in the material world like that. That is one principle. These are certain themes in the different verses I extracted for our benefit. Then he says, all the good and bad are all relative to one's fixedness in his prescribed duties. Meaning, what is good for a karma yogi is maybe bad for a bhakti yogi. What is good for a bhakti yogi may not be suitable for a karma yogi to practice right now. Like that, he gives knowledge about that. He says, depending upon our position, whatever practices we follow from scriptures, that is actually piety for us. Whereas if you practice something beyond our level, higher or below our level, lower, then that is called impiety, he describes. And if somebody is not fully engaged in Krishna consciousness, then they should not give up their regular prescribed duties, he says. We should not think, oh, that's illusion, like that. No. If somebody is not fully engaged in bhakti, they should follow regulation principles like that. So example is, if one is not able to fully engage in Krishna consciousness, but they give up their family considering that family is illusion, Maya. But then they will fall into illicit sex life because material desire is not gone yet, because they not get the higher spiritual taste yet. So they'll go back to illicit sex life like that. And next principle Krishna describes material piety and analytical knowledge of material world must therefore be cultivated until one comes to the stage of directly practicing Krishna consciousness sincerely. So we should follow rules and regulations, not neglect them like that. And then Krishna describes, uh, remember, um, one of the Uddhava's question was, how come Vedic literature talks about piety and impiety, good and bad? You're saying ignore all of that. That's what Krishna is addressing here. He says, we need to take care of those. For ordinary dealings and religious activities, we need to consider discrimination. We need to use discrimination. We need to use our intelligence. For example, for our maintaining our physical health and surviving this world, we need to know what is safe, what is not safe, what is healthy, what is unhealthy, what is profitable, what is not profitable. We need to know that. Otherwise, we cannot live in this world. That's what Krishna describes. But a devotee does not perform elaborate religious ceremonies, nor does he become immoral. Devotee simply chants the holy name of Krishna and easily achieves the highest perfection of life. So even if he neglects some of the duties that are described in the Varnashrama system like that. And also, a devotee dedicates all his activities, even the ordinary activities and religious activities, to Krishna. We discussed some examples yesterday. How brushing the teeth and taking bath, I'm doing them so that I can come before Krishna and I can sing Mangalarti before Krishna. That's why I'm taking bath. That's why I'm brushing my teeth like that. When we see that, that's all, that activities, ordinary activities become devotion service also. So that way, Krishna says, that way in devotee's life, there's nothing but Krishna essentially. And for such a devotee, Krishna gives all protection and maintenance. And devotee gives everything to Krishna. And then Krishna describes, in the material world, whether I'm in the earthly planet or I'm a great living entity like Brahma, or I'm a tree or a plant, all of them have a gross material body made of earth, water, fire, air, and ether, like that. Then these all material elements are coming from Supreme Lord, he says. And then Varnashrama system is created to engage human beings in Krishna consciousness according to their various levels of material identification. That's why I'm a Brahmana, so I need to act like this. I'm a Kshatriya, I need to act like this. They not come to transcendental platform yet. So for such people, Varnashrama system is there, like that Krishna is saying. And then Vedic regulations say, oh, don't do this like that. Why? So that way people can use that knowledge to perform proper activities to get to material mode of goodness. And from that stage, when somebody comes to goodness, mode of goodness, then they become eligible to serve Krishna and enter a transcendental stage of life beyond the modes of nature. Remember in Bhagavatam, we hear the words Brahmabhuta Prasannatma na sochati na kankshati. From that Brahmabhuta platform, one can render devotional service like that. Krishna is also telling that in different words here. And then Krishna describes several verses talking about what is the standard of purity, how do we purify ourselves, what is the pure place, pure tape, pure time, and pure objects like that. First of all, he says a place is impure if it is devoid of devotion to Brahmanas. Somebody doesn't respect Brahmanas, that place becomes impure, he says. And then where the place is not clean, where purificatory rites are being neglected, where cleanliness is neglected, where meat eaters are prominent, where earth is barren, that means not fertile land is there, where people are inimical to devotion service. That's a contaminated place. So opposite of this is pure place. That means where devotion service is being performed, where no four regulated principles are properly performed, where cleanliness is maintained, where brahmanas are there, where devotion to brahmanas is there, where earth is fertile, like that. Similarly, what is a pure time? Essentially, he says, wherever the time is suitable for practicing devotion service, where the time is suitable to do our prescribed duties. For example, Brahma Muhurta hour is very, very suitable for us to do chanting or spiritual activities for that matter. So, And what is the best purified time? When we can achieve the association of Supreme Lord and his devotees. That is the best time ever, like that is described. And then object's purity or impurity is established by application of another object, or by words, by rituals, or by words. That means when a Brahmana says, oh, this is a pure thing, then it becomes pure, he says. Or when the plates are purified with water, then it is purified by another object, like that. Or purified by rituals, or by effects of time. That means rainwater, if you kept it for 10 days, it seems, it becomes pure, it seems. That's how it's described by Krishna. And then similarly, not Krishna, Vishwanath Chakravarti commentary describes that point. And then flowers may be purified by Achmana. When we are offering flowers to Krishna, we do Achmana so that they can get purified, right? And then flowers will become impure when you smell them. Because when you sell flower, we don't offer them to Krishna because they become impure already, like that. Similarly, another beautiful point Krishna says, impure things may or may not impose or cause sinful reactions upon a person, depending upon different situations, basically. For example, given in the purport is, let us say there's solar eclipse happening. At that time, it's prescribed we should not eat any food because that's considered impure at that time. Activity of eating food is considered sinful at that time. But let us say somebody is very physically weak and they're diabetic and they cannot go on without eating food during that time. Then they can eat it. And that is not considered impure, like that he says. So Krishna is saying there are subtle nuances to these rules, like that he's saying. And then he says, various objects are purified by time, wind, fire, earth, and by water, either by individual elements or sometimes a combination of those two. For example, somebody made, for example, when washing dishes, then we wash with some form of earth, some form of soap, and then we wash with water also, combination like that. And then purifying agent is considered appropriate when it removes the bad smell or when it removes the bad covering of the contaminated object, like that. And then he says self can be cleansed by bathing, by doing Vedic rituals like charity, austerity, sometimes by age, personal strength, like that. More above all of these, we can be purified by remembering Krishna always, he says. And mantra is purified by chanting with proper knowledge. So in the purport is explained, when we chanting Hare Krishna Mahamantra, with all this knowledge, we're developing some relationship with Krishna. We're developing some appreciation for Krishna. We're developing some gratitude for Krishna. And we're understanding what is offensive, what is not offensive. So that way we conduct our life according to scriptural standards, so we don't offend others. That way we are devoid of the 10 offenses in the God's holy name. And then we chantly purely without any offenses. That is the pure way of chanting the mantra, he says. And then work is purified when we offer to Krishna. And then he says, sometimes material piety and sin are relative considerations. That means what is sin for you may not be sin for me. Examples are given is, let us say, my neighbor's house is on fire, let us say. Then I try to save them by digging a hole on the top of the roof and enter and rescue them. Then people will say, wow, he's a hero, like that. But now everything is normal. No fire is there. I go and dig a hole on the top. And then they say, this guy is a criminal. Let us call police and give it to him, like that. Similarly, one important principle we can learn here in the BBT purport, Madhvacharya describes. Children under age of 14 years, if they do some sinful activity, we as parents are responsible for it. But when they're above 14 years of age, then they assume the responsibility of the piety and sinful actions that they're doing, like that. So that's why we should be very careful, especially when children are small, to train them so that, first of all, we don't get their reactions. Second of all, as they grow old, they start making their own decisions. They will not listen to us at their older ages. That time, they have the right knowledge and intelligence to make the right choices, like that. And then another principle Krishna describes is the same activity may be considered as degraded for an elevated person, and for another person or For an elevated person, they may consider as degradation. For a fallen person, they're okay. Examples are given. For example, if sannyasi associates with women intimately, then that is considered bad, sinful. But when a householder associates with his wife, that is proper. Similarly, a Brahmana drinks liquor, that is fallen. He is considered as fallen. Whereas Sudra, he drinks liquor moderately, that's considered good because he is following regulation, not drinking too much. Similarly, in this purport is described, spiritually initiated devotees, they should not neglect the four regulated principles. For following the four regulated principles is essential for all of us. No meat eating, no intoxication, no gambling, no illicit sex like that. Otherwise, we'll fall from the elevated position of liberation, like that is described in the purport. So, going to the next section. In the next section, Krishna describes how some important aspects about karma kanda portion of Vedas. For example, uh, what is the path of liberation? Krishna describes by refraining from sinful activities. Then one is freed from those sinful activities. So that's a elevation of the path of liberation, he says. And then what is the path of fall down? Just like some people, conditioned souls cut down trees. Similarly, we conditioned souls are cut down by the laws of nature, he describes. And then he describes in several verses this whole cycle, how somebody becomes so sinful and becomes a person of not so value. He says, so let us say I'm accepting a lot of sense objects and my goal is to gratify my senses only. Then I will develop attachment for them. Then from the attachment, lust develops. Remember, Bhagavad also says this portion. Kamesa Krodhosa Rajagura Samadva, like that. So he says, from lust, lust leads to quarreling between people. And that quarreling will lead to intolerable anger. And then that anger leads to darkness of ignorance. And then from ignorance, people lose broad intelligence. Then they lose everything finally. They lose memory also. And then they will deviate from the actual purpose of life, which is self-realization. And they become dull, like just like a dead person. And then they don't recognize themselves as soul anymore. They become ignorant like a tree. Even though they're breathing, is like as good as bellow. Bellow means like what is it called? Ironsmith or blacksmith. They do like this, like that. They blow in the fire to make the fire come better. So that is also breathing. We are also breathing. It's like as if like we are a non-living entity, like that is saying. So that's why sense gratification is very dangerous. That's what Krishna is highlighting here. And do Vedas cheat people? Because they're telling, oh, if you do this, you can in next life you can become rich. If you do this, next life you will not have a lot of clothes. If you do this, next life you can go to heavenly planets. Are Vedas trying to cheat people then? If their sense gratification is not good, if fruitive activities are not good, then the nice example is given. Example is, let us say, mm, a father wants a child to take medicine, or mother wants to take child to take a medicine. So the child is not taking the better medicine. They'll say, my dear son, why don't you take medicine? If you take this medicine, I'll give you this nice candy. Okay, then child will start to think, okay, he's tricking me. He wants me to drink medicine. That's why he's giving me candy. But what to do? That's the easy way to get candy. Let me drink medicine. Like that, they'll start. But slowly, their disease will go away. Then they'll understand that candy is not good for me. They'll understand like that. Similarly, in Vedic scriptures, karma kanda sacrifices are recommended because people are so attached to sense gratification. People always want to enjoy materially. So for them, the Vedic scriptures recommend, oh, if you do this, you will get this, like that. That's why they are enticing, like how father does it for their own benefit. So actually, considering this mentality of sense gratification of people, common people, Vedas slowly elevate them to mode of goodness, like that. So here Krishna condemns mentality of sense gratification. He says they will desire heaven, they'll desire a nice life on the earth also, next life, and they'll not be attracted to me at all. Then in the next section, Krishna summarizes how Krishna likes Parokshavada. Parokshavada means indirect description of things. Why? Because Krishna doesn't want himself to be taken cheaply by others. So it's confidential knowledge about Krishna, confidential knowledge about Bhakti actually. That's why he's very confidential. Bhakti is kept very confidential. Somebody is inclined towards Gnana, they'll think, oh, Gnana is the best. Somebody inclined to Karma, they'll think Karma is the best, like that. They'll get same conclusions from same way the scriptures based on their mood and intention and their mindset. So also another reason is less intelligent people cannot appreciate transcendental subject matter of bhakti. That's why Krishna speaks indirectly. Sometimes even in Srimad Bhagavatam there are statements, some impersonals may think, oh, see, Krishna is telling. That means Krishna is impersonal. Like that, they can come to wrong conclusion they can come to. So then Krishna describes finally in this chapter, in this section, the Vedic knowledge is very difficult to comprehend. So because Vedas may say one thing at one time, one thing at another time. So we need to know which instruction is applicable for us in the current position of life right now for us. Because some are for karma kandis, some are for gnana people, some are for bhakti people. So we need guidance of a guru and sadhu to understand the Vedic knowledge in context. And not only understand Vedic knowledge in context, but to apply properly in our life also. Because gurus and sadhus extract the principles from the details in scriptures and tell us what is the principle, what is the essence we need to follow, like that. So that's what Krishna is emphasizing. So without Krishna and his devotees, nobody can follow, like that. So that is the essence of 21st chapter, where I'll go back to where we heard about standards of purity and purification, how Karma Kanda portion of Vedas are meant to for gradual elevation, and how we need guidance of Guru and Sadhu to understand Vedic scriptures and apply in our life and grow in bhakti, like that. Now going to 22nd chapter. This actually in one sense is a repeat of what we heard in the Sankhya philosophy in third canto, if you remember. Basically, Krishna describes that Uddhava asks a question actually about different Sankhya philosophies. And then Krishna discusses about soul versus matter, reincarnation, birth and death he defines. And then Uddhava asks the final question. We'll go into that section. So first of all, Uddhava describes that some sages say there are 24 elements. Some sages say there are 23 elements. Some sages say there are 26 elements. Some say there are 28 elements. What is behind their thought process? Why are they calculating differently each of the people? Can you please tell me, Krishna? Because everything comes from you, even the Maya comes from you. You know the answer. You are the best person to answer, like that Uddhavas. Then Krishna answers the question. Krishna says all material elements are present in other elements also. For example, we know in the time of creation, earth, water, fire, air, ether. Like from subtle element, more gross element. From this subtle element, more gross element comes. Like that, from ether, air comes. From air, fire comes. From fire, water comes. From water, earth comes. Like that. Of course, in between the sense objects also that comes. Yeah. So if somebody says somebody doesn't count earth, water, fire, air, but only counts ether, but ether has everything in one sense. So that means they're also correct in counting the only ether, but not earth, water, fire, air. Like that he describes. And then he says, all philosophers are under the shelter of my Maya. So that means whatever they speak is influenced by their tendencies, what are their inclinations, and the modes they are affected by, like that. And then he says, material world is constantly undergoing transformation. So what may be true at the relative time may be false after some time. So somebody may be looking at this particular time of creation. Somebody may be looking at this particular time of creation. So there may be differences like that. But I accept all the conclusions are the authoritative, he says, Krishna says. Then Uddhava asked Krishna to explain difference between Purusha and Prakriti. He explains how Prakriti undergoes changes, takes various forms. Prakriti is dependent, not independent. Pravritti is revealed by another, but Purusha does not change. He has one form, one spiritual form. Is material forms may be many they can take, but one spiritual form. Even spiritual forms can be many. Yeah. So then independent. Purusha is independent. Purusha is self-revealing. Nobody else need to reveal him like that. Then he describes how people's minds are diverted from you. This is Uddhava saying. If people's minds are diverted from you, they become bound by karma and then accept higher bodies or lower bodies, demigod bodies or demon bodies. Please explain how people attain various types of material bodies. Krishna replies beautifully in several set of verses. This is summarized here. He says, Krishna explains reincarnation. How, depending upon the karma somebody does, the mind travels from one body to the next body. And the soul follows the mind like that. That is the transmigration process Krishna describes. Then Krishna describes how mind meditates on objects that it sees and hears. So the input for the mind is what we are taking in from senses. Radhesham Prabhu uses the word GIGO, acronym GIGO. Good in, good out. Garbage in, garbage out. Garbage out. That means if you are feeding the nice things from the senses, we are seeing the beautiful form of Krishna, we are hearing Krishna Katha, we are chanting Krishna Katha, like that, then that becomes a food for the mind. So mind is getting that input. Then mind will be good. If you give good input, mind will be good like that. So at death time, mind loses all perception, he says. And then forgetfulness is death, he describes. And then he says, identifying with the new body is called birth, he says. And then he says, after birth in one next body, Jiva forgets previous life and previous body, just like somebody forgets previous dreams like that. So that's how Krishna explained this whole phenomena of transmigration, reincarnation, how a mind carries one from another body to another body like that. That's what he describes. And then all this is happening in the purview of time. Time is imperceptibly acting. It's creating and destroying, but we cannot see it. For example, we cannot see the nails are growing, but after 2 weeks we can see nail has grown. Now I need to cut my nails. But when it's actually growing, we cannot see. After 1 month or 2 months, we see the hair is grown. But when it's actually growing at that moment of time, we cannot see. That is the imperceptible nature of time he describes. Then, in this way, Krishna describes how uh, the Sankhya Yoga essentially described how different elements are created, but the cause of everything is Supreme Lord. And we should understand that, and we should understand we are soul separate from matter, and that we're transmigrating because of sense gratification, like that he describes. Then going to the next chapter. This is the last chapter for today, Song of the Avanti Brahmana. This is also called as Bhikshu Gita. Bhikshu means like beggar. Avanti Brahmana. His song is called as Bhikshu Gita. So let us see. These are the overall sections of this. It is a nice pastime and nice understanding and philosophy that Krishna describes through this. Oh, I don't have slides for this, but I'll send you after the class by preparing some slides for you for this chapter. But I'll go over them, go over the content of this chapter for you. So basically, in the 23rd chapter of Avanti Brahmana, first Krishna describes it's very, very difficult to tolerate when somebody insults us. The insulting words is very hard to tolerate, he says. And then he says, no one can resettle mind after hearing such insulting words like that. That means our mind becomes so much disturbed when we hear insulting words like that, which is true. Very difficult to control our or us getting feeling bad when somebody insults us like that, right? That's what Krishna describes. Then following that, Krishna says the harsh words that we hear are actually more painful than sharp arrows somebody may release. So because when you release arrows, when they hurt us, actually they can see physical damage and blood and everything. But when somebody insults us with words, that's also as good as sharp arrows. It's even more painful, because arrows, when we can take out the arrow, we can get it uh, treated by doctor, for example, with band-aid and something. After 5 weeks, after 2 weeks, for example, it will be cured and will be okay. Body will recover. But then when somebody uses insulting words and hurts us with words, harsh words, then some people remember for a long time. So even relationships, that's why we should be very careful. So then he starts to describe example of Avadhuta Brahmana, how he went beyond these insults, beyond these insulting words, how he overcame that suffering, how he neglected the mind and overcome the suffering. Like that he explains. So the story of Avanti Brahmana goes like this. One time there was a rich Brahmana, very rich Brahmana, and he used to do business. By doing business, he used to gain more and more money. But he was very greedy for more and more money, like that. And he was very miserly. He doesn't spend any money, not for himself, not for his body, not for his family members, not for relatives. He never spends any money for anybody. And he was very, very lusty. And because of that, he is very angry also. And then he was devoid of doing any kind of dharma, because to do dharma, some donation we need to give. He was not doing anything like that, because he didn't want to waste money. He is considering wasting money as wasting, even if you do some service for others, like that. And then mm, he didn't enjoy also with that money. Not only he didn't spend for others, he didn't enjoy also, because he wants to keep the money and count it. That's what he was doing, miser. So his family and guests became very envious, because he used to disrespect them all the time. So family became very envious towards him, and then presiding deities became angry on him, because he never gave anything for sacrifice. And he, over time, remember, when we have a lot of money now, that means we are reaping the benefit of past piety, past karma. But when the karma is gone, we lose money. Similarly, this Brahmana lost his piety and all his wealth got lost. And his wealth was taken away by relatives, thieves, providence, time, and government, like that. Then, when he lost wealth, he's not rich anymore. So nobody was listening to him, not even family members, not even relatives. Nobody listens to him. Everybody ignored him. And then Avanti Brahmana describes, I tormented myself by greed for wealth. Like that he says. And then Krishna describes how miser's money causes self-torment in this life, and it sends them to hell in the next life also. So just storing all the money is not good. We should engage, especially as grihasthas, we should give charity. And then he says all good qualities are destroyed by greed. If somebody is very greedy, then all good qualities are destroyed by that. And then he says there is anxiety in all stages of attaining wealth. For example, while earning money, we need to do hard work. That way we'll get anxiety. And um, then we want to increase more and more wealth. Then we'll get anxiety. And we want to protect the wealth so that it's not going to taxes. More taxes are not gone. Uh, Health is okay. We're not giving too much money to doctors, lawyers, like that. We need to protect that. And that is one kind of anxiety. And then when we have to make some expenses, we are so attached to wealth, then also is an anxiety. And then when we have to enjoy some wealth also, that becomes anxiety. Oh, my wealth is getting less. And then similarly, all men experience great labor, fear, anxiety, and delusion because of the wealth, he says. And then he says there are several problems of greed for wealth, he says. What are the problems? Because of greed for wealth, somebody may be indulge in stealing, somebody may indulge in violence, speaking lies, duplicity, lust, anger, perplexity, pride. Somebody become proud, quarreling because of money. People quarrel with each other. They become envious of each other. And then dangers caused by women, gambling, and intoxication. So Krishna says, So remain aloof from this greed for wealth like that. And then Krishna describes this human form as is very valuable. Remember in yesterday's section also Krishna said this point, how human birth is very, very valuable like that. So there's sloka, 22nd sloka of this chapter, 23rd chapter. Labdva janmamara pratyam manusyam tadvijagriyatam tadana tadanadritya ye swardam gnanti yantya subham gatim. Human birth is is desired by even demigods also, because rare because human birth is so rare. If being Brahmana is even rare also. If one does not use this human form of life, he is killing his self-interest. Yesterday also we talked about Atmaha, like that. Self-interest means what is good for him also he is losing like that. And then he says, no one should attach to material prosperity, because um, a person with human life, which is gateway to both heaven and also to liberation, if you become attached to the abode of material world, material wealth, then what is the use of such life? Because we are misusing the human form of life like that he describes. And then he says, discriminating people, they use their money, youth, and strength for perfection. Perfection means for spiritual life. And this is what Avanti Brahmana is considering. Intelligent people use their wealth for money, their valuable life, uh, money, and strength for spiritual perfection. But I didn't use it like that. Now I became old. What can I achieve like that? Avanti Brahmana is thinking. And he thinks, why intelligent people should suffer in search of this money? See, all is gone now. Then he thinks, for one who is in grip of death, wealth, sense gratification, and those who provides those, that will cause actually another birth only. So if you're going after wealth and all, we'll be stuck in the material, this cycle of birth and death only like that. That's what he describes. And then he finally describes still he's describing, Avanti Brahman is thinking, actually, wow, I got detachment from all these things. That the only possible because I received mercy of Krishna, like that is things. There's a beautiful verse here. Nunam me bhagavam stushtaha sarvadeva mayo harihi ena nito dashametam nirvedas chatmana plavaha. So he's thinking, he's recognizing, only because of Lord's mercy, I'm detached now like that. And then he gains determination through that detachment. He thinks, I'll become austere now and I'll pursue my real self-interest, my spiritual life, instead of trying for more and more wealth like that. And then he maintains some hope. May demigods bestow some mercy on me so that I can stay on the spiritual path like that is, he prays. And then he describes what are the different causes of mercy, he says. He analyzes which is the cause of mercy like that. For example, the verse says, Ayam jano me sukadukka hetur na devatma graha karma kalaha manaparam karanam amananti samsara chakram parivartayedyat. Basically, there are different causes of misery. One is people. Are people causing my misery for me? Because of other people I'm miserable, I'm suffering? Or is it because of demigods are causing trouble to me, that's why I'm miserable? Or because of my own body I'm miserable? Or because of different planets, graha dosha, because of that I'm miserable? Or because of my own past karma I'm miserable? Or because of my bad time, that's why I'm miserable? Like that he analyzes different factors that could be the cause of his misery. But he concludes, none of these are real cause of misery, because mind is the real cause of misery, he thinks. Because mind is desiring for sense gratification and mind is influenced by modes. Because of that, mind is taking different designations, different identifications. I am rich person, I'm Indian, I'm American, like the different identifications. Because mind is making all those calculations, that is why Mind is entangling the soul, because soul, instead of looking towards super soul, who is also living next to him in the heart, is paying attention to the mind. So that is why is degraded like this and is experiencing the suffering and misery like that. But the process of mind control is actually concentrate our mind on Krishna, the Supreme Lord. That's the best thing we can do to control our mind, he says. And then the analogy of the chariot of horses we hear. How when you have controlled mind, the senses also can be controlled. From Bhagavad Gita we learn also. How when we develop spiritual intelligence, through that we control the mind, and the mind can control the senses like that. Then we can become the master of senses. Otherwise, we'll be slave of the senses like that. Then he analyzes how this mind is the cause for repeated birth and death like the samsara. And it's also the cause of all quarreling between everybody. Then he develops determination like that, and he wants to pursue spiritual life now. So he doesn't care. In this case, he actually doesn't care about what is that? Like people abuse him. Like when he's eating food, people come and urinate in his plate, it seems, and pass stool in his plate. People are throwing stones at him. People are blaspheming him because in the past he mistreated everybody, right? Family and relatives, everybody. He didn't do any good things, any pious things at all. So they could not understand his elevated platform spiritually. They started scolding him and degrading him like that. So that is the pastime Krishna describes about Avanti Brahmana story to tell how we should be careful with the mind, how we should deal with the mind, and that's so we can be free from suffering like that, suffering and enjoyment at material level, and elevate to focus our mind on spiritual platform and elevate ourselves like that here Krishna describes. And the last chapter for this section, I have the overview slide, but not the rest of the slides for that chapter. Let me show the overview slide. Mm. Okay, where is the sharing screen? Yes. Yeah, the last chapter is Sankhya Yoga. So this is also very close to the third canto and second canto descriptions of primary creation that is discussed. Basically, first part is like Sarga, what is the creation done by Supreme Lord? And then Krishna says, I am the one who is maintaining, I am the one who is causing destruction and everything. And then like that, finally, he says, I spoke this Sankhya knowledge to you, like that he says. So I'll elaborate on each of these sections. Uh, it's a simple section because especially because we read already, all of you must have read the third canto and second canto, but I'll still give the overview because it is important because Krishna is covering one more time. So it's important to recollect what Krishna is saying as essence in this section. So Krishna starts to say, now I'll tell you about Sankhya. By understanding this, you'll give up all material duality. Remember, Kapil Dev also said like that. And then he says in Satyuga, there's no difference between what we see and what is the reality. That means everybody was seeing real things, not like they're not bound by illusion like that. And then everybody in Satyuga were having spiritual discrimination. They were unallowed devotional service. They're naturally inclined to do devotional service. They didn't do any sinful activity at all, not even in the mind also. Such great quality people were there in Satyuga, he describes. And then he describes how the interrelation between the Jiva and Prakriti. He says, generally this topic is described as a tripod. Jiva, Prakriti, and then Purusha, Supreme Lord. Supreme Lord interaction with Prakriti and Jiva. Jiva interaction with Prakriti. Jiva interaction with Supreme Lord, like that triangle, you can say. So, from absolute to truth, both are coming. Both Prakriti is coming and Jivas are also coming. So, what does Jiva do? Jiva embodies subtle causes and manifests products of matter. That's how Prakriti is creating products of matter. And then what does Jiva try to do? He tries to enjoy. And in order to enjoy, he desires, oh, let me enjoy like this, let me enjoy like that. That's how he's getting implicated through Prakriti. And then Krishna describes how he is the cause of creation, how he does the creation in a summary fashion. But we already heard this in third canto, but I will describe that portion one more time. Basically, we heard in the third canto how Mahavishnu glances at the Prakriti, and then by his glance at the Prakriti, he impregnates the Prakriti with jivas living entities, along with their swabha, their natures, and also along with the time element kala. And from that that is actually pradhana. That's called as pradhana. By pradhana is a state where material nature, modes of nature are very inactive at that stage, and the pradhana becomes when the modes become active, pradhana becomes transformed into mahatattva, and then mahatattva slowly gets transformed into false ego or ahankara. Then ahankara in interaction with sattva guna, rajoguna, tamoguna, that leads to different material elements we heard. For example, ahankara in relation to sattva guna leads to 11 demigods, that is sense devatas, and then ahankara in relation to rajoguna or passion, that leads to prana, life air, and 10 senses and intelligence. Ahankara in relation to ignorance, that leads to the 5 tanmatras, the sense objects, and the 5 gross elements like that. Of course, I missed the ahankara in relation to mode of goodness, also leads to mind like that. We heard all of this creation, right? So that's all Krishna describes. And then after describing that, Krishna finally concludes that he's actually cause of all the maintenance of the material world also. And he is the cause of destruction also. And then Krishna gives one important principle. He says, basically, what is the purpose of knowing all this creation and all that? One important principle we need to understand is, the purpose of describing is understanding that there's matter is coming from Krishna, spirit also is coming from Krishna. And they both need to be employed in service of Krishna. That's so we need to see. That means we're coming from Krishna, so we need to serve Krishna. Everything else is coming from Krishna, we need to engage there in service of Krishna. That's so we need to see relation with Krishna. That is the purpose of real Sankhya Yoga, like Kapil Dev also described. So generally, atheistic people, what they do, they analyze, oh, this material element is there, this material element is there, like that. They analyze that. But then they don't see what is the cause of those material elements. Supreme Lord is the cause of the elements. So we need to engage in devotion service. They don't get to that conclusion. But we as practicing devotees need to get to that conclusion. That's what our acharyas are emphasizing whenever the Sankhya Yoga comes. That's what Krishna discussed in this section. I think another 5 chapters are there in Uddhav Gita, but we ended at 23rd chapter today. We'll continue. Another devotee will continue from 24th chapter. I'll pause here. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Any comments or questions, anyone? Yeah, otherwise, we'll continue the Gita. I'll send you the slides. Last chapter, I did not make slides, right? I'll make some points for the last chapter, last 2 chapters, and then send the slides to you. Yeah? Okay. Thank you so much. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kupasandubhyevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Thank you so much, devotees. Hare Krishna.